Morning, everybody. I'm John McManus. I'm the president of the Golden State Salmon Association. Thank you for being with us this morning. We've gathered some stakeholders in California's salmon industry to discuss the looming restrictions that we're looking at on the ocean salmon season for this coming year. I want to say a couple of words of introduction. I will ask the panelists then to say a few words from their perspective, if I've left anything out in introductions. And then as quickly as we can, we will get to your questions. You may wonder why we're in this predicament this year. And there are some near-term and some longer-term reasons why. But at the end of the day, we're seeing decline in our salmon runs here in the state of California, in large measure because what's happening in their freshwater environment or freshwater habitat, where they're just not getting enough of it to give us healthy populations year in and year out. I might remind that the salmon industry in California is normally about a $1.4 billion industry statewide in a normal season, which we haven't had in a while. And it would normally employ about 23,000 people. The salmon out of the Central Valley are caught in the ocean, not only off California, but all the way up, excuse me, the Oregon coast. So they're a major economic shot in the arm for coastal communities and for inland communities. Having said that, I want to take an opportunity to introduce folks, and we'll come back to each of you panelists and invite you to say a few additional words. Mike Conroy is with us. He is the executive director of the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. They represent commercial fishermen, including salmon fishermen here in California. Tim Eli is with us. Tim is with the Outdoor Pro Shop up in Cotati, probably the biggest sport recreational tackle retailer, certainly in the Bay Area, and they sell quite a bit of salmon gear. George Bradshaw is with us. George is a commercial salmon fisherman out of Crescent City, who often spends his summers down here fishing out of San Francisco. Joe Conte is with us. Joe is a seafood distributor based out of San Francisco with a company called Water to Table. And Mike Ogney is with us. Mike Ogney is a GSSA board member, and he also is a co-owner of a six-pack charter boat out of Bodega Bay called Real Magic. So with that, if we can toss to the panelists just to say a few more words of introduction and how you're coming at today's developments. Let me also just add that we're just wrapping up the Pacific Fisheries Management Council March meeting, where they gave us an idea of what type of season that we're going to be looking at this year, thus the grim news. There's three alternatives that they're considering, both on the ocean sports side and the ocean commercial side. The PFMC will reconvene in early April and they will finalize those decisions. So for most of these issues of where and when we're going to be allowed to fish on the ocean, they won't be finalized till April. There is an exception with the recreational fishery in Monterey Bay, south to the Oregon border, which has been finalized. So Mike Conroy, if I can toss to you for a moment.
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks for putting this together. As John noted, my name is Mike Conroy. I am the executive director of the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Association. Our membership includes California commercial harvesters and buyers from Crescent City down to Santa Barbara. While we tend to focus on impacts to those folks, the impacts will be felt by many others. For example, tribes for which salmon is an integral part of their heritage. Members of the larger fishing community, which I expand to include ports and harbors, processors, marine mechanics, fuel dock operators, et cetera, and their families. In-river guides that rely on access to salmon for their purposes, and the vast majority of Californians who rely upon our members for access to wild-caught salmon. It bears noting, as John noted, these impacts could have been avoided.
Thank you, Mike. Tim Eli, can we go to you?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm Tim Eli. I'm with Outdoor Pro Shop. We're in Sonoma County, California. These closures, these restrictions are going to have a huge impact on our business. Loss of revenue, upwards of $500,000 this year, potentially. I have 24 employees that we employ, and we're drastically going to have to take a look at our revenue and the loss of it and how it affects everybody. So for me and all the fellow retailers in this business, this is going to hurt, and we want to avoid it in the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. George Bradshaw, can we go to you?
Yeah, thanks, John. My name is George Bradshaw. As you alluded to, I'm a commercial fisherman, home based out of Crescent City, California. Been doing this my whole life, third generation. Fish the whole West Coast from Washington down through California, and I serve an integral part in the salmon season process, serving on the salmon advisory subpanel through the PFMC, as you mentioned. Help creating these salmon alternatives, and also looking at the ocean abundances and working deeply with the state on moving forward, and agreeing with the rest of these panelists that hopefully in the future we could avoid these near disasters and/or disasters.
Thanks, George. Joe Conte.
Yes, Joe Conte with Water to Table Fish Company here in San Francisco. I'm down at Pier 45. We're right here on the pier with hoists unloading boats. I originally started the business about 11 years ago, selling to predominantly restaurants in the Bay Area. We unload boats. We have 6 trucks that deliver to the Bay Area restaurants. When COVID hit, we immediately pivoted over to home delivery. So pretty cool that we're able to unload boats, have full custody of the fish. No one else touches it. We cut it ourselves, get it directly to people's homes. The news that this season is going to get cut back drastically for salmon is a big hit for us. Salmon and crab is pretty much the iconic fishery here in San Francisco. It really drives most of the boat unloadings here at Pier 45. November, December is usually our biggest month because of crab, and we lost that. And then our May also is one of our biggest months, mainly because of salmon and the demand for salmon in the Bay Area here. But my bigger concern is just losing more of the fleet. I saw a lot of guys just kind of hang it up during crab season. There a lot of guys saying they were going to see how salmon turned out before they made some life decisions. And I don't even know if a lot of this news has spread to everyone yet, but it's going to devastate what's happening down at the pier. We're just getting hit left and right with COVID. We had a fire down here. We lost crab season. We're losing salmon season. Things are getting tough. And the biggest frustration is just kind of the water politics behind it. I mean, it's kind of tough to fight for a season if the fish aren't out there. We want to do what's right for the fishery. But when you see, the mismanagement that is causing that bad science, it gets super frustrating, especially when it happens year after year.
Thanks, Joe. On the phone also, we have Mike Ogney. Mike, if you can hear us. Looks like you're muted, Mike. I don't know if you can unmute. Well, maybe not. We'll work to try and get that fixed. Again, Mike is a co-owner of a charter boat out of Bodega Bay. And at the rate things are going, it looks like at a minimum, we're going to, or the charter boat fleet in Bodega Bay will lose all of the month of April, May, and for sure, 3 weeks of June, perhaps 4 weeks. Mike, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was a mute command that I had to do.
Do you want to say a few words about who you are and your business operation?
Yeah, I've been on the board of directors of GSSA for the past 12 years, and I'm one of about a dozen six-packs that operate out of Bodega Bay. We have a couple of full-size passenger for hire vessels, but when we get shut down, our customers aren't coming out to the coast, and our customers and their families support so many other surrounding businesses, whether if it's the campgrounds, vacation rentals, restaurants. It trickles all the way through the entire community. It's not just fishermen that are impacted by these closures. It's everybody in these small coastal ports. And Bodega Bay is just one of a of a dozen smaller ports up and down the coast that are just see huge negative effects from these closures. And going back to Joe's words, I totally agree. This incompetence on the water side to get our baby salmon down to the ocean is very frustrating.
Thanks, Mike. This year's problems in the salmon industry are caused by a shortage of salmon, both on the Klamath River to the north, as well as the Sacramento. The Golden State Salmon Association works primarily on Sacramento Basin issues. And I can tell you that there are major decisions in front of both the state and the federal governments right now that they could make that would greatly help our salmon runs. There's one other thing I just want to call out before we go to questions, and that is the Golden State Salmon Association has asked the state of California to take a couple of emergency short-term steps to help us get out of this predicament in the immediate years to come. Specifically, people may know that currently they truck about half of the hatchery fish from Central Valley hatcheries down to areas near Vallejo, near the Carquinez Bridge, where they are released into San Pablo Bay. Recent work demonstrates that if those trucked fish are moved just a little further west, like to Sausalito, their survival improves by about 200 to 300%. So we're asking the state to initiate that action this year and move those release sites west. We're also asking the state, because we're in a quasi-drought situation right now, to consider trucking all of the fish from the state's hatcheries this year instead of releasing some in basin where we're likely to lose them. So I'm going to stop there for a moment. We have another entity on the line here. You may just see the words GSSA. That's our moderator, Dennis Whitaker. And Dennis, if you can queue up and some calls or questions rather, we could now take some questions.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to just use the raise your hand feature, I will see that and then we will call on you and pull you in. You'll be able to talk directly.
John, while we're waiting for your attendee to raise their hands, I think it would be helpful to point out as well the reason why this trucking of the fish from the hatcheries is going on in the first place is because the in-river conditions are so poor. Water flows, water temperatures, all of that, habitat is so poor in river that the only way to get any survival now is to use that trucking method.
Yeah, I'll just say a word or two to elaborate on that. Our biggest problems actually are when these fish are babies, when they're, Mike Ogney mentioned that too, when they're about 3 inches long and they're trying to get out of the Central Valley in the rivers or the hatcheries where they were born. They're trying to get out to the ocean. They're actually lousy swimmers, believe it or not, and they don't swim out to the ocean. They have evolved to get flushed out to the ocean during spring runoff. The only problem is these days, in most years, we don't have spring runoff because it runs off and gets trapped behind a dam, captured in a reservoir, and that runoff needed to move these baby fish out to the ocean is not available. It's basically akin to breaking a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt of that runoff moves these fish to the ocean. You shut down the machinery and stop the conveyor belt, you've stopped the transport of these juvenile fish. And the truth is they become easy prey in the Central Valley for predators. So I'll stop there and ask Dennis, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to bring in Dave Hurley.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, John, what would you like the public to know? I know we have a public comment section coming up on the 23rd of March. What information would you like that you feel is most important that people need to know about these pending closures so they can weigh in?
You know what? I'd like to toss that question to George because George is deeply involved in the season setting process. The comment I would make from the periphery, and George, tell me if I've got this right, is the season closures that we're looking at right now are protective of the resource. I don't know that we're complaining that the council has done anything other than what it's supposed to do, considering the cards it's been dealt, but I'd like to get your input on that, George.
Yeah, thanks, John. I fully agree. I mean, us as fishermen, us as stewards of the resource, first and foremost is trying to take care of that resource and ensure, sustainability and survival of it. Harvesting is a side note. That is what we do as a job, but it isn't, the first point that, we go into the process for. There's, escapement goals, they call it, for the minimum needs or the needs of the river to replenish the system and, stay sustainable. We always manage to those points, if not above, to ensure that there is more sustainability, hopefully, in the system. The problem is what you just alluded to, the outflows in the rivers and the survivability of those smolts getting out to the ocean more often than not makes our efforts of conservation mute. They don't get out. I mean, we can get them back in once they survive and get out from the trucking, but they don't, the cycle's broken, like you said. I think the big note here from the commercial side is that compared to last season, which was also a constrained season, only half of our state, the two southern cells, had access. We were working on constraints then, but compared to last year, we've lost upwards of 2/3 of our productive time this year on the water, and more so over half of the allowable time on the water, and that's compared to last year's already constrained seasons.
Are there any other panelists who would like to comment on Dave's question?
Good. It's just preparing, right? My internet's working.
Okay.
Do I need to sign something?
You're good, Dave. I hope that answers your question, Dave. And Dennis, do we have any others?
No questions at this time. Oh, hold on. Danielle Bacher.
Dan, can you hear us? Looks like you're muted. Oh, there you
Yes,
are.
okay.
Go ahead.
Are you going to get into the specifics of the closures and what they are, or at least summarize them?
The specifics are quite in the weeds. I would prefer not to get into the weeds here. I think at a high level, and I would invite input from other panelists, I think that we can say that on the sports side in the ocean, we're looking at probably about a 40% loss from a regular season. And George, do you want to comment on the commercial side?
Yeah, like I just said, it's upwards of 2/3 of a loss of a closure through the productive time of the year. And over half, a cumulative loss of our season. Typically the season rate is supposed to, or could anyways, run from May 1st through August. And now from all those dates, we have, out of these three alternatives, like a 2/3 loss of time.
Let me add another comment there, Dan. If you're interested in fishing recreationally south of Pigeon Point in what's called the Monterey Cell, which includes all of Monterey Bay and all the waters actually down to the Mexican border, on the sports side, they're going to have a relatively good opportunity to fish this year. They will open on April 3rd, and depending upon which season option is chosen, they'll at least get to fish through August, if I'm not mistaken. I think the various options being considered contemplate September closures down there in Monterey in what's called the Monterey Cell. So they'll get an opportunity on the sports side down there in Monterey.
And John, if I can jump in, and this might also help answer the question David had asked previously. What we have now, the three alternatives that the council adopted for public release aren't likely going to reflect what the final seasons are. That's why we have the next 3 weeks to volley it around. I know state of California is having its public hearing on the 23rd of this month to further discuss, so that in April we come back to the council, tweak around the numbers a little bit, not a lot. I mean, it's not going to be that we're going to be able to squeeze more fish out of it. It's just how do we more equitably distribute the season so that markets aren't impacted to a high degree, fishermen aren't impacted to a high degree. So I think it does bear noting that while we have a rough idea of the framework that's going to be set up for how the season's going to look, we don't know what it's going to look like until next month.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, and that's correct. I mean, John, you alluded to, the next council process is in early April. It'll be another week process trying to finalize all of this, given the constraints and, all the conservation needs of these runs. So, yeah.
Dan, I hope that answered the question. Dennis, do we have any others?
Hey,
Yes.
John,
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I do have one point that, to going back to the trucking issue. In recent history, we have trucked during drought the vast majority of the state hatchery fish, and that was back in, I believe, 14 and 15. And it's of my opinion that we likely would have lost 16 and 17, the sport and commercial seasons of those years if it had not been for trucking. And we're looking at this only as from a human perspective, a business perspective, but we need to look at the ecosystems of the ocean. There's a lot of other animals, such as orcas, that have been declared endangered, that rely on healthy runs of salmon coming back down, and that should not be overlooked either.
Appreciate that, Mike.
Dave Hurley's got a question. I'm going to bring him in.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, following back on that, it seems to me that this year is set as far as it goes, but all the work that needs to be done with the public needs to be done for the future. And what I hear you saying is that there needs to be a push for people to recommend, obviously, the water issue, but trucking those fish to someplace where they're going to survive. Because I think this has major impacts. You think about the recreational boats that are going to lose 3 months of their season. They're going to be in the bay fishing halibut, or they're going to be on the reefs working rockfish. So it's going to have impact on other species as well. So it's not just one type of thing, because those guys are going to continue to work the best that they can. They're going to have to change and adapt. But I mean, I guess what I'm saying out of it, the public needs to be aware in some method that there has to be a push for changes in terms of trucking and the types of things that we have control over. The water situation is very difficult to control. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Mike, do you want to comment on that?
Oh, yeah. And I don't disagree. I think, whatever we can do to increase survivability of the smolts, we need to look at. And if it's, as you noted, John, releasing the smolts in Vallejo, great. If there's a more productive manner to ensure that there's a higher survivability of smolts, and I'm teeing you up there on that one for, the net pens and things like that, that does seem to have a higher survivability. But the State Water Resources Control Board, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, there are these agencies that have power to implement changes that would benefit salmon and benefit the ecosystems. And, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like we're a priority, or that the salmon are a priority. That it seems that the priority is serving other hands dipping in their, dipping into the water cookie jar. So, I think we really need to be more vocal, more active in trying to ensure that these iconic, salmon is an iconic fishery of not just the state of California, but up and down the West Coast. And it's of severe tribal importance. And we can't lose sight of that. We can sit here and say that this is a downswing, but if this downswing continues, there's going to be no swing to go down anymore. I mean, I'm not saying that we're at the point of no return, but unless we change how we're operating, that's not too far off.
I'd just like to add to Dave Hurley's comment. In the last drought, roughly 2012 to 2016, we lost the majority of natural spawning salmon in the Central Valley. And then we now largely rely on the hatcheries to keep us afloat and to provide seed stock to try and recolonize the natural areas in the Central Valley. But during that time, while we were losing salmon during the drought, according to the California Almond Board, we saw 340,000 acres of new almond trees go in. And this is a very thirsty crop. It takes about a gallon to produce a single nut. So this year, when we don't have a lot of water, the state and federal water agencies have already signaled that they're hoping to move about 5 million acre feet of water south of the Delta. And this comes out of Northern California's salmon rivers. This is water that's needed by salmon. To the salmon fishing industry, we watch this. At the same time, they're putting in tens or hundreds of thousands of new acres of almonds. And we're wondering, where's the balance here? Where's the balance? We've had a salmon fishery in this state for probably 150 years in one way or another. And we're watching it decline in front of our eyes in ways that are manageable. There's things that we could do. This doesn't have to be. And it wouldn't take a lot of water to get us back into a balanced state. The State Water Resources Control Board is charged with keeping us in a balanced state. In recent years, they have not taken action, and we need them to. And to Dave Hurley's comments, I wonder if there's any other panelists that have something to say before we take another question. Dave, did that give you what you need?
Yes, it did, John. Thank you.
Dennis, do we have anybody else?
I don't see anybody with their hand raised at the moment. Oh, hang on, one just came in. Dan Balker again.
Hi, Dan. Dan, you might be muted.
Actually, his hand, let me see. Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah. What are the three, if you could just boil it down to three major long-term reasons why salmon are in decline this year? And you know, in terms of a big term perspective, just to boil it down for people that try to understand it. Because one of the things that I already get, I just posted an article up on a bunch of Facebook pages, and people immediately reacting, well, they need to shut the salmon season down, you know, and a lot of these people, and supposedly these people are activists that should know more. They think that the big problem is, I mean, they realize that there's other problems like water and ocean conditions and stuff like that, but they think a major cause of the decline is fishing. And I've got this, you know, in a couple places, and I had to correct it.
Can I toss that to Mike Conroy and George Bradshaw, since you guys are so deeply involved in regulating fishing to keep it responsible?
Yeah, I'll go in. I mean, and harvesting, like I said, you know, just a little bit ago, is second to the conservation needs of these rivers. Every management process that I'm involved in, which is, you know, most of it, you know, conservation is the first goal. You know, trying to keep these runs sustainable is, you know, a goal that we shoot for. You know, I think the main issue that you asked about, though, you know, why these runs aren't sustainable and is in river. The biggest issue these fish have is the in river habitat and the in river issues that don't allow them to leave from their spawning grounds or their hatcheries and make it to the ocean. You know, those survival rates are so low and dwindling. You know, the only thing sustaining it at the moment is trucking or net pens. And, you know, but to revert back to the question, you know, harvesting or catching fishermen, you know, sport, recreational, in-river, ocean, you know, are strictly managed. The West Coast fisheries as a whole is the most managed and most conservative fisheries in the West or in the world. You know, these stocks are not being overfished. We've got processes in place to ensure that they aren't. And, you know, stocks that were once overfished have been rebuilt under these plans. And, you know, the salmon fishery is no different. You know, we have regulations in place that don't allow over harvest to happen. And like I said, all the way from the start to the end of the management practices, there is conservation, and the needs of the river systems of these fish come first and foremost.
And John, if I can just follow up on that, the federal law that applies here, the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, has conservation in its name, comes before management. So clearly conservation is one of the primary purposes of the Magnuson Act. But these seasons are developed, fish count, allowable removals based on years of experience. They're modeled, they're designed to allow what, for the lack of a better word, the surplus fish needed to replenish the stock to be harvested. And some way, somehow in there, what's happening on the state side in terms of ensuring that the rivers are healthy enough that those numbers can provide what we need. There's a missing piece there. I think, as John, you alluded to, the conveyor belt's broken.
You know what, if I can ask a question of fellow panelist, Tim Eli. Tim, can you describe what a normal April, May, and June would look like in your store in a year when we get a normal season and fishing opens the first weekend in April?
Oh, it's extremely busy. People get excited. Salmon is king. They want to have fresh fish for their family and friends, and we are as busy as can be. People get ready 30 days before, get their downriggers ready, get the rods relined. People want to get outside now. They've been cooped up in their homes for a year now, and they want to go fishing. It's very important to everybody. So losing these months is going to hurt real bad for us.
And Joe, Connie, if I can ask you a question. Your mic might be muted, but I'm wondering, can you say a couple words about any importance or special value that salmon has to your customers compared to other fish?
Oh God, it's the crab and salmon are the two things that the chefs are talking the most about and plan around and have events over and have special dinners over and special menus. There's also just so much buzz down here at the pier that time of year. I mean, it's been pretty dead down here with all the restaurants closed. And it was so nice to see a little bit of activity, at least in January when crab finally did open up, but that only lasted about a week and a half. So, you see a lot of fishermen looking forward to salmon, and that's when we have a lot of activity down here. We have boats, we have trucks coming in. Customers are calling me. Customers are excited about it. Last year was really big for us when salmon opened with retail customers sitting at home during COVID. The other thing I want to add, which I think is really important, is just the concept of food security. And when things go to hell, when COVID happened, there was grocery stores around the pier here that didn't have any fish. And when I say no fish, I mean their fish markets were completely closed down. Missing meat, missing pastas, missing beans, missing toilet paper and things like that. We were down here unloading boats, and we have a huge resource right off our ocean here, and we were able to unload boats and get food to people's homes. Now, it's not like people were at home starving, but who knows what the next calamity might be. And for us to have that infrastructure, the boats, the hoists, the trucks, we have an ability to get fish to people's homes. All we need is gas. And that infrastructure is going away. I mean, we're close to losing our ice machine here on the pier just because there's not enough volume to, justify the expense of the guy who's running it. We don't have an ice machine. We don't have infrastructure. We don't have boats. We don't have that infrastructure, and it's going away. I'm seeing it disappear. Younger fishermen are not getting into this business. Older guys are giving up, especially if they need to do repairs before a season. I mean, are they going to spend $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to get ready for a season that might not even happen? So there's just so much uncertainty and despair down here. It's getting a little bit sad, and it just seems avoidable.
It is avoidable. I'm getting a message here from Dennis. It looks like we may have no more questions Dennis, if I have that right, maybe we should take this opportunity to thank everybody and wrap it up.
Yep, no more. I don't see any more questions.
Okay. Well, thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for participating today. Mike Conroy, Tim Eli, Joe Conte, George Bradshaw, Mike Ogney, and thank you, Dennis. And thanks all of you who came and attended. If you look at the press advisory, my number is there. If you need to get a hold of any of these guys for additional information, track me down and I'll hook you up. And thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Hey, John, do you want us to shoot out our phone numbers in case anyone wants to call us or anything?
Sure, why not?
Joe Conte, 415-823-1464.
Mike Ogney, 707-875-2628.
Yeah, follow up with the mics. Mike Conroy, 562 area code 761-7176.
My name's Tim Eli, 707-486-6380. Thank you.
George Bradshaw, 707-954-9339.
Thanks, Joe, for making a suggestion. A good one. I think we're good, folks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.